Yeah, I see it. Okay. Good afternoon, and welcome to Up Close and Cultural with Dr. Karasay. I would like to wish all of you all a happy new year and welcome to 2022. We made it out of 2021. This has definitely been an interesting 2 years, but without going into that, still, I would like to just welcome you all to my show and just say thank you for being here and sharing this space and this moment with me. Um, you all can, you're watching us now, you can watch us on Facebook. We are on Instagram, Twitch, Periscope, and also on KUAW.org. You can tune in to or call us at 816-599-6893. And we are streaming live right now. Today, if you saw where I had uploaded what we will be talking about today, I uploaded where we will be taking this month to discuss some things in our community surrounding missing persons and marginalized communities concerning missing persons, domestic violence cases, exploited youth, issues surrounding human trafficking. And I wanted to put that out there just in case there are people who have some sensitivity to that issue. I won't be showing any photos or anything like that. This is just an, I would say, an intro. You know, my show is on the first and third Sundays. So on the 16th, I will be having some special group of ladies here. And they are ladies from an organization called Sisters of the Underground. And this organization actually specializes in search and rescue, for one, of women who are victims of domestic violence, as well as human trafficking, as well as missing persons. But not only that, they run the entire gamut of issues surrounding that population. They also provide supportive services to domestic violence victims, and then wraparound services throughout the process of when those things happen and then afterwards as well. So, but you will hear more information about that on the 16th. So today I wanted to give a little bit of information about what happens when people in our community go missing, and then how our community responds to it, how law enforcement responds to it, as well as how the media responds to it. And then talk about how we should respond to it. So if you watched, I guess the promo that I put up yesterday, I put up some statistics about missing persons in our community. And, you know, they were quite alarming. And I will just summarize a lot of it rather than throwing a lot of things out there at you, because there's a lot of information out there. But of course, I'll leave that to myself and other professionals to deal with. But this is just to give you some information to let you know about why myself and other people are so passionate about the things that we do. A lot of times when, or unless something hits you personally, then you don't take as much of an active role in it. And I understand that it's not that you don't care, but again, like I said, sometimes unless it hits you personally, you don't take an active role in it. But my hope today is that you will realize that when something happens to one of us as a community, that it happens to all of us. because it can very well be you one day or someone that you know. And our hope is that if we can bond together and stop these things from happening, then the cases that I deal with on a day-to-day basis will start to decrease to the point where we won't have to deal with this at all. So with the information that I was looking up, you know, it particularly with the FBI, because they deal with everything on a national basis. I know that I am in Kansas City right now, but just dealing with national statistics, there are about 600,000 people, including men, women, and children, that go missing every year. And about close to 40% of that are from the African American community. So that means that approximately 200,000 of those people are people from our community. So with that being said, that means that 200,000, if you can think of that number, 200,000 women, children, and men in our community go missing every year. Now, I want you to think about exactly how many of those people do you see on the news? How many of those people do you see being reported every year? So I just want you to just think about that. Just keep that in the back of your head right now. So when I first moved here to Kansas City, I actually had the pleasure of working in Wyandotte County, Kansas, and I ran the Juvenile Intake and Assessment Center. It was actually being ran by a company called KVC at the time. And unfortunately, it was taken over by the state. And so with it being taken over by the state, the children, well, let me go back. So the Juvenile Intake and Assessment Center is where some people called it kitty jail or labeled it kitty jail. So anytime a child had contact with law enforcement, that came through the Juvenile Intake and Assessment Center. That's basically in a nutshell. So now what happened, and the reason that I love that is because it was ran by a mental health facility. But when it was taken over by the state and KVC lost the grant, it was moved into the jail right across the street. My office was at 6th and Taromie. It was moved right across the street to the Wyandotte County Jail, or whatever that place was called. But yeah, it was the jail. It wasn't the prison. But either way, so you can just imagine the impact. These children are now being processed through the jail rather than being brought into the office as they were before. So if you can just imagine just the impact alone. So it did not matter whether they were missing or if it was a crime being committed, or if it was trouble at school, or if they were just found on the street or needed help. Rather than coming into a mental health facility where their first encounter would be with a mental health professional, their first encounter was to go inside of a jail. And I would just leave that right there. So back to the topic at hand. In our community, with that 200,000 number of our people being missing, our cases often go unsolved, and they remain 4 times unsolved. That number is 4 times larger than white Americans. And I will tell you that there are various reasons behind that, and you should be very, very alarmed by that number. again, going back to what I asked you to keep back or in the back of your head about the media, I still want you to recall just one person in our community that you have seen broadcast online, on the radio, or on TV that has gone missing. That's one factor, and we'll get into that. But again, advocates such as myself, we are heavily involved in this for that reason, because our cases go unsolved at that alarming number, 4 times as much as being unsolved. And then also because we want our cases to be handled better. We don't want them to be handled sloppily. And that is not a dig or a jab at any of law enforcement or any officials in that way whatsoever. That is not at all what I'm saying. It is just in the manner of the systems at play behind it. And these are things this is information that is available in your community. And none of this is in any secret vault or any information that is given to me that is not available to you. So I challenge you to call your law enforcement offices, the commissioners, and go to places where this information is. I won't get into all of that, but you can find me I will put my website in the chat, and in all of the places where I said that you can connect with KUAW if you need help in finding where all of this information is, so you can research it yourself. I only have an hour here, so I won't go into all of that. But either way, first thing that you have to understand when it comes to law enforcement, on top of them not being staffed, are the systems that are at play. Police departments are graded. Yes, they do receive grades. And this is what I mean about looking up information about how your community is ran. So police departments receive grades according to the amount of homicides that they solve, or violent crimes, such as homicides, robberies, murders, and things of that nature. So again, with those types of things come the money sometimes. So missing person cases are not considered, they're not considered crimes. And that's for varying reasons. People go missing for a lot of reasons. And until you know why, then you cannot say that a crime has been committed. So with that being said, it's not, police departments are not going to always expend the resources or expend the money in looking for missing persons unless they actually have the information they need or they consider they need before they actually put their people out there to look for the missing person. So that is very important, which is where the organizations that I mentioned who will be on the show come into play, and why advocacy is important in our community, and why it is important that you know the systems that are at play. Because how you make a police report determines if your missing person is even looked for. And I say that to say this: a missing person is very generalized. If you walk into a police station and you say, my child ran away, well, they will ask you questions such as, well, why did they run away? Outside of the age, If they are a minor, a young child that cannot fend for themselves, say maybe a toddler, a 3, 4, definitely someone that young, but I'll even up it, maybe an 8, 9-year-old, then yes, that's cause for some concern because someone that young is not able to fend for themselves on the street. However, when you start up in that age until the teenage years, 14, 15, 16 year old, and especially once you start getting up until the age of consent, then some will brush it off and say, well, why? Was there an argument? Or they'll be back. Have they run away before? Maybe they just need a breather. And unfortunately, that's what happens in our community. And that word runaway, if you're labeled as a runaway, then you are not considered a priority. And it's unfortunate that a lot of families have to deal with that. Even if you know in your heart of hearts that your child is in danger, if your child is labeled a runaway, then it is not given top priority, simply because they have been labeled a runaway. And now you don't have the resources that you need to help you find your child. And a lot of times your child or your missing person, because when it comes to an adult, it gets even worse because now you have an adult who's missing. And you can say, well, my wife didn't come home. Well, did you get into an argument? Well, she's grown, so you have to wait a little while. Maybe they'll turn up, maybe they won't. But if there's not any evidence of any foul play, then again, there is no priority or there isn't anything there that in the police eyes or law enforcement eyes that is telling them or putting them on high alert that we should move and do something about this. Even if you give them every reason to believe that this is uncharacteristic of your loved one and this has never happened before, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because they still have this list of criteria that makes them move in certain situations. And with that being said, this list of criteria is actually what triggers things like the Amber Alert. And I'm sure you all know what the Amber Alert is. The Amber Alert is actually an acronym for the American Broadcast Emergency Response Alert for when children go missing. I know it was named after a young kid that went missing. Of course, it was a young white child that went missing a while ago. And when you hear that, you would think that, hey, if a child goes missing, then an Amber Alert is issued, and that is, the end of the story. And no, that's not it. That's not the case at all. Amber Alerts are only issued if certain criteria is met. And no, I won't get into that either. I challenge you to look that up. But even when that happens, there are certain systems at play with that as well. And then when you look up the statistics with that, you will find that African Americans and people of color are disproportionately classified as runaways. And because of that, you will not be qualified to be a part of the Amber Alert. No runaway ever is listed on the Amber Alert. Only if you are abducted are you classified in the Amber Alert. And there are other criteria. But again, pay attention. If you are classified as a runaway, you are not a part of the Amber Alert. And I will tell you, when you have a missing person, I am not encouraging you to at any point give false information to law enforcement. That is not at all what I'm saying. I am just saying that when you do report, be careful in the language that you use be accurate in information that you give to law enforcement, because you do want to get your loved one home. But also, with that being said, I want you to also give yourself every chance to get your loved one home. And so I am also telling you that reporting your loved one as a runaway also gives them the excuse to not have your person reported as, not reported, but seen as a priority. And so when you see things pop up in the media where, or I'm pretty sure that you've seen on the news where you know this person is missing, but then you see you see all of these things happen, and you see, well, this person may have disappeared or was last seen here at this gas station or at this park, and XYZ happened. And then at the end of the story, there'll be this block that says, there is no reason to indicate that this person is in danger. Well, a lot of times that's code for that person is a runaway. Because how can you give this whole story about this person being one place and all of a sudden they're gone, and then at the flip of a tongue, they're no longer in danger or they aren't in danger? It just doesn't make sense. Again, pay attention to the systems that's at play. So when it comes to, the question of the term runaway, it's very important. So I want you to just really, really just pay attention in how you report your loved one. And if you are with someone, because a lot of times, which is also very important, when you have people who are going through crises such as that, and they aren't able to speak for themselves, and you have to be there to advocate for them on their behalf, then, you be aware of that as well. So, I also talked about the promo about how this is a lot of things that happen to us. It comes from somewhere, I would say. It does not pop up out of nowhere. And we can, if you follow the times, or follow, I don't want to say the trends, but our population, we've always been marginalized, and we have always been considered less than. And so when you think about the term runaway, it dates all the way back to when we were enslaved. And when, back in the day when we were enslaved and you escaped, when you escaped from the slave owner, you were considered a runaway. And so when you left, of course, you're not considered a person, you're considered property. So you were considered to have committed a crime. So now there's a bounty on your head. There is a fugitive bond put out on you. And now you are this thing, or this, how can I put it? This something that has escaped. So now this word runaway already has this negative connotation put on it, with our face attached to it, that dates all the way back to slavery. And then even after slavery, and we go back to, Civil War times, well, I would say after, you can look this information up as well, dating back after the Civil War, when our families were trying to reunite, we were using the media outlets to try, which were, of course, were the papers. And people were putting ads in the paper just trying to find their loved ones. And so, they were putting out missing persons reports the best they could. Of course, the families were either, they had been sold, and that's how they were separated. So And of course, they were called runaways at the same time as well. But then there was this, it backfired on them in such a way, because now you had the nation battling itself, because if you of course was in one part of the country, then you had the right to do that, and you were thinking, okay, I can look for my loved one, and the media is going to help me by providing me this outlet to find my loved one. When in another instance, another part of the country did not feel that way, and they see this person that is missing and they're labeled a runaway. But if they are found in this other part of the country where they are still considered property and are not necessarily agreeing with the change in the times, then now this person still has that bounty on their head. So there is this conflict and still this portrayal of what is right for us, this negative connotation that's put on our head, and then how we are seen in the media, which is exactly what we still as a population are dealing with today. And so it is, like I said, it has been going on for years, and you have to understand the history of why things have happened if you want to change the future and how you proceed with it. And one part of that is you have to also pay attention with how we are seen in the media. For so long, how we are portrayed in the media as people, how our children are portrayed in the media, being that, or without going so much into that, what we see and how we are put out there, how we are seen, also affects how people respond to us. So when we are labeled as runaways, and then we are seen in the media as troublesome, or we are seen in the media as being not so concerned about ourselves, then there are others who will look and say, well, we don't have to put so much effort into finding these children. So that also puts us in a special category to where they say, well, maybe they're responsible for whatever happens to them on the streets. And if they left home, then hey, so be it. It was their choice. So I would just say, be very careful, because in that, we're no longer seen as victims. Our children are no longer seen as victims. And so the urgency to find our children or our Black women, especially when it comes to human trafficking, which when I'll get to that in a second, it makes it no longer, well, I would say it pushes back the urgency to find us. Like I said before, it pushes away the urgency to find us. And so it also takes away, in speaking about children, it takes away the youth of our children. When our children are seen on TV being tased, or being handcuffed or being treated a certain way by law enforcement or other individuals, such as the case, Tamir Rice or Tamir Rice, I'm so sorry, or the other young lady who was in the young lady, I'm sorry, her name is escaping me, but she was in the back of the police car and she was maced. I believe this was a young lady. This happened at school. But when our children are seen in the media that way, then it gives off the effect that when they go missing, that also somehow they'll be okay, or that they will be able to withstand whatever happens to them. And so because of that, on the other end, when people see that, especially people who are out to do our children and our women, and not leaving the men out, but when they are out to see the most vulnerable of our population, which would be our children and our women, they look to see to do us harm, such as sex traffickers, then that makes them easy to target because they know that, well, first let me define sex trafficking. So sex trafficking is the transportation and the recruitment of people for the purpose of sex. And so about 1 in 6 missing persons, just to tie all of this together, just so you know, 1 in 6 of these 200,000 people that I spoke about that go missing are actually targeted for sex trafficking. So with that being said, sex trafficking is getting more prevalent in our society. And it's very, very sad to say, but it is. And sex trafficking, it remains hidden. And because of that, and coupled with the fact that our children and our women go missing so easily and then are not being looked for as vigorously as other populations, this makes them more vulnerable for people who commit sex trafficking, I would say. Or I would say that they are targets for these types of crime. So, as African Americans, we are far more vulnerable for being preyed upon and targeted by traffickers and predators when it comes to grooming and luring. These predators, in their mind, they're seeing everything that we see when it comes to the media. They are seeing that, hey, this population is being devalued and no one is looking for them. So this is perfect. So with that being said, we need to be very careful. We need to, as a community, we need to lead better. We need to step up in our communities and not only advocate for ourselves, we need to advocate for the families who are going through these issues. We need to be supportive of the groups, the advocates, and even the law enforcement. And I know a lot of people disagree with that because I do recognize, especially in this time, I do recognize, and I will repeat myself, I do recognize that in this time, that there are a lot of people who are anti-law enforcement. However, they are still here. And you have to recognize that law enforcement still have direct contact with our children. They have direct contact with our women, our children, our men, our marginalized population who are victimized and who are out on the streets for this very same reason. And I will give you an example of why I said that. So a lot of my clients I have in the criminal justice system, I would say I have had the fortune to have their cases seen in a different light and changed from them being charged with prostitution and seen as a criminal, and have it changed from that to them being seen as a victim of sex trafficking. Because honestly, I will say that there are some who simply don't know. Ignorance does exist, whether it is willful or it is just because you don't know. And I will just speak to people who don't know. There are segments, people within law enforcement who just do not realize that there are, excuse me, that there are, or who do not understand the trauma of our community, who do not understand the trauma bonds that not only sexual abuse, but that pimps can have over prostitutes or sex traffickers can have over their victims. So when you encounter someone that you have picked up off the street and they refuse to give you certain information, you would think that they are being complicit, or that they have been complicit in everything that has happened to them. And so you will just be eager to, or I won't even say eager, or your first thing is to just charge them with prostitution, when that is not at all what happened. This is a 16, 17, 18-year-old child who cannot be complicit in anything, who has been groomed and lured and has been the victim of a perpetrator. And I'm not speaking about all, I'm just speaking about cases that I've worked and speaking about particular situations. So you have someone who has been groomed and who has been lured, and now they will have this felony charge on their record of prostitution, when in reality, this is someone who was kidnapped in their youth, and then they were sex trafficked, and then they were turned into a prostitute because of their circumstances. So going back to what I said, having that relationship with law enforcement and then being able to train them on trauma bonds and the effect of trauma, as well as just the mental health aspect or the mental health piece of what happens during that time of when that child is on the street. Because please understand that the person who leaves your home, whether they're kidnapped or missing or whatever happens, I don't care if it's a day or a week, a month or years, is not the person that you get back. So educating law enforcement on that is what helps save that person's life of having a blemish on their record of prostitution, or getting them the supportive services they need because they were indeed a victim of sex trafficking and sexual abuse. So it makes a difference. It makes a difference. So with that being said, collaboration, communication, education, advocacy, it all matters. It all matters. So as a community, it is so important, because no one person can do this alone. No one organization can do this alone. And to think that you can neglect one or push one to the side as if they don't matter is not it. What I will say is that we have to take responsibility for ourselves. We do, and I do say this strongly with my full chest, that we do have to take responsibility for ourselves as a community. No one is coming to save us. And so that is why organizations like Sisters of the Underground, who again will be here on the 16th, will be coming to explain what they do and well, not how they do it, what they do, and to explain the resources that are available. But as a community, we need to band together to not only change everything that I spoke about, including how we're seen in the community, how we respond to when our people are missing, all the way up to how we support one another within our community. We have to take the lead in doing these things before anyone will have any sort of vision, wherewithal, or want to help us. And then understanding that all of that is secondary, because even if they don't, we have all of the resources, the skill, and the knowledge to do it ourselves. And that is the main point. That is what I bring to all of us. And again, that is the whole point of this show, the Up Close and Cultural, is just to bring the knowledge that we all as a people, we have it within ourselves to change the narrative. We have within ourselves to move everything about us into a different narrative. We can rewrite everything. We can change the focus. We can change the system. We are involved in every aspect of every system in this nation right now. There is not a system at play in this nation that a Black person is not a part of. We are not in a time where we can't read. We are not in a time where we are not available to knowledge. We are not in a time where we are prohibited by our speech or anything in any way. There are a lot of roadblocks, and there is a lot of work to be done. But it starts by doing it. And that is all that I'm saying. So I am just saying, get involved. Just get involved. And so, again, the first thing that I asked when we got involved in this is to still just think. If any of you are online anywhere, if you can think about one person, a child, an adult of African-American descent that you have seen on the TV, even here in Kansas City. The latest case that was out there was the young white woman, Gabby Patino, that went missing. We don't even know this lady. But if you get on missingpersons.org or the sheriff's website, you will see so many African-American women who have gone missing. Where are their news coverage? Has any of the news stations given them any play whatsoever? Have you seen any of that anywhere? I challenge you to ask why. Just why? And again, I'm waiting. If you can think of just one African-American person that you can think of that has received even half of the media coverage of one of the white people who went missing, I would just love the name. You drop it in the chat or email it or somewhere. Because unless I'm wrong, because I couldn't find it. I just couldn't find it. And again, that is just to make you think, because it's so easy to roll off names. because a lot of Sandra Levy, you know about Lacey Peterson. Those names are easy. They're easy to come by because they receive so much media coverage. People who live so far away from us, but they received national coverage. And you sat at home and watched these women who lived in states far, far away from you, but your local news stations, people who live next door to you, or around the corner from you, or even in the same suburb as you, never reported, not one time, people who live in the same city as you. And I just challenge you to ask why. I also spoke about this thing called white woman syndrome. I'll touch on briefly. Again, that's a term coined by one of my sorority sisters, the late Gwen Eiffel. And just in summary, just piggying back on that, that is just a term that she came up with that pretty much defines how the nation gets it gets galvanized and it gets enraged and it gets moved and motivated whenever someone with white hair and blue eyes of female descent goes missing. And then if she goes missing, then everyone gets involved, and the media immediately jumps in place, and you see the neighbor is interviewed, the dog is interviewed, the pastor is interviewed, and then the whole trial is covered. You have the child's newspaper at the school is covering it. You get all of this information. You never hear anything bad about that person. And then if that the young lady is found, then everybody is on TV crying because they are just so excited, that she's found. And that's great, because I don't want anyone, to be missing and not be reunited with their family. And all those things are wonderful. And then, God forbid, if something happens to her, then of course the nation mourns with her. But when it happens to an African American woman, and who's weeping for us, or who is searching for us? And then if we're not being reported missing, or if there is no knowledge of us being missing, then who is looking for us to even get the media coverage, or to even get the sympathy of not being with our loved ones? So again, those are things that I just want you all to think about. And if we are not receiving those things from outside of our community, we need to ask ourselves, how do we? Well, first, why aren't we receiving it within our community? And I'll tell you that there's no reason why we shouldn't. And then how do we make those things happen within our community? And the good part about that, which is what I'll close the show out on with, is that there are a lot of groups out there. There are a lot of advocacy groups out there who are doing the work. There are people out there who are putting in the work, who are going out there, who are advocating for children, who are looking for missing persons, who are being out there, boots on the ground, who are helping families, who are advocating in the courtroom for not only just for when they go missing, but also on the front end as far as prevention. And, who are providing classes on situational awareness as well as self-defense. So, and with children, so that they do not get themselves or can I don't want to say get themselves into situations, but when situations don't seem right, they know how to respond to certain circumstances, so they won't be privy to predators. Um, so there are a lot of people who are out there doing the work. And I want you to know that these organizations exist, and that is actually what part two is going to be about. I want to bring those organizations to the forefront because not only do they need, not only do we need to know who they are to change the narrative, so um, the community knows about it, but also because they need your help. Um, and I'm a big believer that not only that when you know better, you do better, but people also, they do better and you can become what you see. And unless you see that there are men who protect us, and when you see women who do support women, and when you do see people in our community who do advocate for other people in our community, then you will say to yourself, hey, I can get on board with that. Hey, I think that I can do this. And so that is the reason why I want to build that bridge so that we can bring all of those things together and bring these people together. Because with that, we have this network of minds, we have this exchange of ideas, and that is how you create nations. That is how you change the narrative, and that is how you build and rebuild and connect and make things happen. So with that being said, I thank you for your time. I hope that you do tune in on the 16th so that you will be able to meet Sisters of the Underground and get this information. If not for you, I hope that you just hold on to it and then be able to spread it out to people in your community, because this is a national organization and an international organization, I would say. And websites. I will drop links to websites and emails. And again, as always, if you have questions about anything that I've said today, or if you have questions or need information about anything that I've said today, or questions that you might have going forward about something that you want to see discussed on the 16th, then leave that as well. And I will be more than happy to get that information for you. So that is all that I have today. Thank you to KUAW for this platform and for giving me the opportunity to discuss this very important topic. And that is all that I have. Thank you guys for tuning in to Up Close and Cultural with Dr. Karasek. And I will see you guys on the 16th.